Lecture 23, continuing with Appearance and Reality, and Abby and Elliot's second lecture.
Welcome back, everyone. On Monday, we discussed Russell's argument against the naive view. That is, his argument to the conclusion that you never directly perceive ordinary objects. We also, right at the end, briefly went over his suggestion that, instead, you perceive sense data. And we ended with a question. If the sense data account of perception is right, why posit ordinary mind-independent objects at all? Why not instead say that the world is just nothing but sense data? This week, we're going to look at an argument from Vasubandhu to that very conclusion, although, of course, Vasubandhu doesn't state his argument with the jargon of sense data. But before that, Russell. Russell does believe there's a mind-independent table there, and not just Brown sense data. You read Chapter 1 of the Problems of Philosophy on Monday, but his argument for the existence of the mind-independent table doesn't come until later in the book, in Chapter 2. But don't worry, I'm going to briefly go through that right now. His argument takes the form of an inference to the best explanation. Here's what Russell says. The hypothesis that everything is sense data is, in fact, a less simple hypothesis, viewed as a means of accounting for the facts of our own life, than the common sense hypothesis that there really are objects independent of us, whose action on us causes our sensations. So he's going to give an inference to the best explanation. That is, he's going to say, look, the best explanation of the patterns of sense data we have is that there are mind-independent objects that cause these sense data. He gives two examples of patterns of sense data that are apparently best explained by appealing to mind-independent objects, and both examples include cats. We happen to have some cats on hand, so I just couldn't resist illustrating his arguments on film. For the first example, suppose you see the cat in one location and then later on in another location. Russell thinks that the best explanation of this pattern of sense data you have, the best explanation of this is that this thing, the cat, travelled from one location to the other. But that explanation is not available to the person who doesn't believe in mind-independent objects. In Russell's own words, quote, "It's natural to suppose that it has moved from the one location to the other, passing over a series of intermediate positions. But if it's merely a set of sense data, it cannot have ever been in any place where I did not see it. Thus, we shall have to suppose that it did not exist at all while I was not looking, but suddenly sprang into being in a new place." End of quote. In other words, better to posit the mind-independent cat, which gives a simple story as to why we had the pattern of sense data we had, than give a long, disjointed explanation like we'd have to if we didn't believe in mind-independent cats. In the second example, Russell considers a certain property that the cat can have, the property of hungriness. If there's a mind-independent cat, presumably it's the kind of thing that can be hungry, and its having this property would help explain various patterns in our sense data. For example, it would help explain its walking towards the food bowl, or its meowing when I haven't put food down, and so on. But the person who says there's no mind-independent cat cannot give such an explanation. Here is Russell again. If the cat consists only of sense data, he says, it cannot be hungry, since no hunger but my own can be a sense datum to me. Thus, the behaviour of the sense data which represent the cat to me, though it seems quite natural when regarded as an expression of hunger, becomes utterly inexplicable when regarded as mere movements and changes of patches of colour, which are as incapable of hunger as a triangle is of playing football. Overall then, Russell ends up with the picture of perception you see on the bottom of this slide. All we directly perceive is sense data, but these sense data are caused by real, mind-independent objects like tables and cats. While we never directly perceive these things, we can infer they exist from the kinds of sense data we have.